recording yet?
Okay, I'm rolling.
So we are recording now.
Okay.
First, can you tell me your first name and your last name and spell it for me, please?
Brian Barkow, Brian Barkow.
Okay. And how long? What's your title with the department?
I'm currently an inspector with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your role as inspector? What do you oversee?
I currently command our Investigative Services Bureau, which is basically made up of detectives and investigators, where we use traditional investigative techniques, but we combine it with intelligence-led policing and community-based policing strategies and data-driven strategies to combat violent crime that occurs, whether it's on the freeways, in our county parks, and with it being community-based, changing that direction when Sheriff Lucas came in back in 2019, we've had an extremely successful record with solving especially violent crimes.
We'll get to that in a second, but first, how long have you been with the office?
24 years. I'll have 25 years in September. I rose through the ranks, started off as a deputy sheriff, where I was actually assigned to the Day Reporting Center, which was an alternative to incarceration program, something that that I believe very strongly in, that I'm very adamant in, that we need to do more in the area of restorative justice. Inclusion, diversity, community-based programming.
And what did you do before you were sheriff's deputy? What line of work were you in then, or did you go right from
I went to college, and I started off. I was an auxiliary with the Milwaukee Police Department, and I did loss prevention while I was putting myself through college.
Ted just texted me and told me he's coming 5 minutes behind us. So just anyway, we've already started. So
yeah, sure.
He misses out, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So first question is, what is your plan? What would you do differently to fight these rising crime numbers? We see homicides up to record levels in Milwaukee, but what would you do right now differently from what's being done right now to stop crime?
Well, first and foremost, we need to use evidence-based strategies and data-driven strategies. Number one, we don't want to over-police communities, especially communities of color. And with resources being finite, unfortunately, we can't be everywhere all the time. But using data and evidence-based decision-making models, we can combat areas that have higher levels of incidents. And then at the same time, we need to do more with community-based programming. We have to stop the cycle of violence, do more violence prevention, and partner with our community partners in order to achieve that. Office of Violence Prevention. There's much more that the Sheriff's Office can do in those areas and play a critical role in addressing a lot of the areas.
One of the things you're going to have to debate and argue with is the county board. They control the budget for the Sheriff's Office. Some of them would like to see some of your budget taken away from you and put into some of those community resources, violence prevention, mental health counseling, poverty reduction, those sorts of things. Would you support them taking money away from your budget for those other enterprises?
No, I respectfully disagree with that, and here's why. The Sheriff's Office is not a traditional law enforcement agency in the sense of we're out in neighborhoods policing. Our primary focus is, our areas of responsibility is the jail, the courts. Yes, we do the freeways and the parks, the airport, okay? So much of our budget is in the area of security and prevention. We know nowadays that the threat of active shooters, mass shootings, mass casualties are at an all-time high. So taking those funds away would create an unsafe environment, much more unsafe in the jail than what it is now. There's a lot more that we need to do to secure our courts, our courthouse complex, and the airport, because all of those things are real. And I would say this as well. The number one threat that faces the country now is domestic violent extremism. It is the number one threat. So active shooters, mass casualties, taking money away would hinder us in being able to make these areas safe and secure.
You would have 600 employees. You would oversee a budget of about $50 million a year. One of the ongoing issues is staffing at the jail right now. Staffing is down. What would you do to bring more officers and more jail staff on board right now in the midst of this hiring crisis? Because other employers are having a hard time hiring people as well right now.
Right. Well, we need to find more opportunities for, we need to create better opportunities for our employees. We need to value them more. Pay in and of itself is not in my opinion, the reason why people are leaving. I think it has to do more with management and supervision. If you look at human resource blogs and experts, I mean, more often than not, the number one reason that they cite for the reason for the great resignation has to do with management and supervision. So we definitely need to take a look internally on how we treat our employees, benefits that we offer, and I would definitely work with the county executive and the county board to make Milwaukee County as a whole, not just the sheriff's office, but Milwaukee County as a whole, a much more marketable, viable employer for prospective employees. We have to be competitive in this day and age.
One of the things that we saw in recent weeks was a suicide inside the Milwaukee County Jail. There was one last year as well. As sheriff, what would you do to keep those inmates safe and to prevent suicides moving forward?
Well, part of my plan is to create a jail ombudsman program, which would be an independent, like, oversight person or committee that would come in to assist us with identifying those possible issues where people are thinking of suicide. I'm a strong advocate of increased mental health resources, bringing those into the jail, partnering once again with our community partners to bring those resources into the jail as well.
What about inside the jail, as far as has staffing led to some problems inside the jail as far as disciplinary problems? Some of the, maybe staff is not able to check in on people as much. Maybe people are missing meals because there's not enough staff. Do you know if any of that's going on inside the jail, and any plan that you have to take care of some of the ongoing issues inside the jail?
I mean, no, I don't believe that any of the incidents were a cause of staffing, although it is definitely a concern of mine, because if levels get too low, we could be looking at even more, incidents like that in the jail. So we have to also be smart with how we use our resources. But there again, bringing in more programming, better programming, mental health resources for those that are either contemplating or thinking or just struggling with the fact that they are inside the Milwaukee County Jail, I think we would do a lot towards the prevention. I often say that we don't speak enough about what we can do from a preventative measure, which is a lot of what my plan and strategy and vision and focus would be as your next Milwaukee County Sheriff.
And as the sheriff, you have to deal with community relations, and we've seen law enforcement in recent years really have a lot of criticism thrown at it, especially for what we saw in cases like the killing of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
What would you do as county sheriff to maybe heal that divide between some of the community in Milwaukee County as well as law enforcement?
Sure. I mean, well, part of my plan, and I'm the only candidate that has vowed to create a community advisory council. It would be the first ever here in Milwaukee County, very much maybe in the state of Wisconsin. But that's where bringing in community partners, where all communities are represented, okay, to sit down and talk about the issues and find common ground so that we can heal rather than continue to be divided and work towards solutions and in improving those relationships. Also, I vowed to create more transparency and accountability by creating public-facing dashboards that the public would have access to see. I'm all for transparency and accountability. We have the technology to do it. Why we haven't done it, I really can't answer that question, but as your next sheriff, that would be one thing that I would do day one.
Some of these things that you're outlining, proposing, will cost more money. You're looking at the county board behind you that might be skeptical of giving you any extra money. They may want to decrease your funding. Are you prepared for a fight? And what are you going to argue? How are you going to make that argument to the county board that these things are needed, that maybe more funds are needed for the office?
Well, I would say that I'm very much fiscally responsible. As far as transparency and accountability, public-facing dashboards, things like that, we have the technology right now. That will not cost us one penny to do that. And yes, I mean there are issues of safety and security. I know that the judges, have voiced concerns about safety and security. And we do have a level of responsibility to the citizens of Milwaukee County that they are safe and secure when they're visiting, our county buildings. So I wouldn't characterize it as a fight, but I do think we can find common ground. And I've long been a problem solver, not a problem creator.
One of those problems that we talked about was staffing. The other problem is overtime. The overtime numbers are higher than they've been in the past.
Yeah.
What would you do about the overtime issue, and how could you solve that problem if it is one?
Well, overtime is a problem, and a lot of it has to do with how we staff and how we deploy resources. Using data-driven, evidence-based deployment strategies, we can reallocate the resources that we have and do a much better job with reducing overtime while still maintaining the services without adding necessarily additional positions.
I want to ask about reckless driving. That is definitely a concern for many of our viewers. Driving on the interstate, that's one of the areas where your deputies will be patrolling. Do you have any ideas, any proposals for the future for cutting down on reckless driving in Milwaukee County?
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's about deployment strategies, right? We can't be everywhere all the time, but we can use our data in a much more efficient and effective manner to identify those hotspot areas and deploy accordingly. Work with our partners, State Patrol, and our other local municipalities, and also work with our courts to start to hold those accountable that are committing, that are driving recklessly, driving in the passing lane. And also, if we want to bring speed and all of that down, when we're patrolling, we also need to kind of patrol at slower speeds or whatever to get that behavior to change.
Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for making time for me. Last question is really anything I didn't ask you that you want to share for your vision for Milwaukee County if you were elected sheriff?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a lifelong Milwaukeean. My wife Aisha and I have lived here all our lives. I grew up on the north side. I went to MPS, graduated from UWM. I have a lot vested in Milwaukee and Milwaukee County and making it a safe place for all communities and for everyone. And I would say that I'm the only candidate that has actual plans that can be implemented on day one, and that I have the experience, the strategy, and the vision to carry those plans out.
Inspector, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to get one shot of us, and then our shots.